I love survival games. I always have. Starting with a struggle that was the DayZ mod and all its weird spin-offs, I ended up losing years of my life probably and many pairs of underwear to the terrifying experience that was Subnautica. I bounced off something there.
Hello there.
And there was a time where early access survival game got my gears going every time I saw it. On the horizon, baking beneath the sun, there is a brand new one launching very soon using a massive IP. Could it be the next big thing, or will it just be a spice-fueled fever dream? Of course, I am talking about... Hello, it's me, and I'm finally not talking about an extraction shooter, thank... In this video, I want to talk about Funcom's brand new survival game, Dune Awakening, and if it can hold the mantle of the cult classic Dune franchise. The studio is known for Current Exile's Secret Worlds, if you ever played that, and believe it or not, one of the longest running MMOs to date. Anarchy Online. Random side note, I'm a huge fan of Josh Strife Hayes. If you haven't seen his video, I'll put a link down in the comments. He does a fantastic video on Anarchy Online, and you should go and check it out. They also published this XCOM-like game called Mutant Year Zero, and it's fantastic and criminally underrated. You get to play as a talking duck, for f***'s sake. Survival games have got my shit going for years. I've played practically all of them, and by now I have seen the wheel reinvented time and time again. I've seen entire studios turn themselves into the Titanic, clutching their survival game baby like Rose hung to that door. And the biggest question I have these days is if there's still room for survival games. Are extraction shooters the new survival game? No more pissing about with building a shed in the woods somewhere, and instead just nail-biting combat where you could lose everything at a moment's notice. Anyway, I bet plenty of people are wondering what the f*** Dune Awakening actually is, so let me tell you. Before we jump into the video, I have a quick favor to ask, as does every other YouTuber. Please like and subscribe the video. It does me a massive favor and helps me hit my goal of 1,000 subs by October. Thank you. Starting from the top, it was originally a novel published in 1965 written by a gentleman called Frank Herbert. Anyways, it's now more commonly known for a 2021 film starring Jason Momoa and Timothy Chalamet, who you may recognize from Lies of P. That's a joke, by the way. The basic outline is political intrigue set in space in and around the planet of Arrakis, known for a few things, namely sandworms, the Fremen, and spice. The latter probably being the most important thing in the entirety of the Dune universe, as it allows interstellar travel. Basically, the pilots get really high after doing a key or two of this stuff, and then they can see time and space. Long story short, the game takes place in an alternative timeline where all the actions in the film never happened. And instead, the Fremen have gone missing, and you are a spy sent to find out what's going on. Your ship is intercepted and exploded, you land in the desert, and a stranger finds you and helps guide you on your way. And that's it. You're left with nothing but a bag of utensils, a sandy crack, and a vague idea of what's going on. I am going to apologize early from this point onwards, in that I probably won't go into the story very much because I wasn't really paying attention. For me, it was way more important that I learnt the game and actually got to grips what was going on, to know if I was going to enjoy it, to actually give a shit about the story when I go into it proper. Also, there's a lot of weird and wonderful words that are used within the Dune world. I'm not even going to try and replicate them because I'll only it up, and that'll just make me look like a bit of a twat. So anyway, if you're here for story or anything like that, unfortunately, you'll have to find another video. But if you want to find out more about the game, let's crack on. Right, let's start from the top with character creation. You get to design your character, and it's not the most enthralling character design, but it all does look relatively quite pretty. It's very much one of those does the job scenarios. It's not quite as involved as some other character creators out there, but it's enough to make your character feel unique to you, and that's a pretty good start. You pick how you look, and if you're anything like me, you make yourself but more attractive. And let's be honest, that's a pretty tall order. Then you pick some background choices that affects your character as you start the game and play through the story. One of the first things that sets Dune Awakening apart from other survival games for me is the fact it has a talent tree. It almost works as a class light mechanic in which you pick a basic class to begin with and you're given some simple abilities, and then as you explore the world you'll meet NPCs who allow you to advance your class or branch off into other ones, which means that you can pick up some of the other abilities. You're never locked into just one tree, which does give you some freedom of the f*** around and find out variety. You also get to pick where you originally come from, which gives you some unique dialogue effects within the story and one specific emote to your guild. The only real difference that I can tell is that it adds a little bit of world building and character flavour. Once done, you set off, blow up, and then get grounded on the planet's surface for you to begin your adventure. You do a basic tutorial where you learn how to manage your resources, how to mine, and how to fight, and then eventually you're kicked into the open world map to begin your journey. Now the first thing I've got to get off my chest is that the world of Dune Awakening looks kinda boring. There's really no easy way to put it, but effectively the entire game takes place in a big ass desert. It's orange and sandy, that's it. There's no tropical biomes, there's no lush fauna or rolling tundras, it's just sand. That being said, I never found myself bored while exploring. There's a lot to do than just build sandcastles, although that is a very important part of the game. To begin with, the quests are pretty simple. Build survival equipment, basic weapons, kill some bandits, and eventually build your own little base. Easy. As the game progresses, they start getting a bit trickier. Further on, you choose between two houses vying for control, which is an important part of the Dune storyline. The storylines have you venturing into interesting locations which either happen to be PvE dungeons or sometimes PvP experiences. Now, I didn't get to see the full game within my beta experience, but I did end up putting about 20 hours into it, which is saying something, considering I barely scratched the surface. Combat is a key aspect of any survival game, and Dune is no different. In the future of Dune, melee combat has returned to the forefront due to these special, strong shields a lot of people wear. The basics are, if someone with a lasgun fires and hits someone in the shields, it causes a nuclear-size explosion. Because of this, the now most powerful weapons aren't used in infantry combat. And instead it's more of a lo-fi or traditional technology instead. Ceremonial knives, dart guns, that kind of thing. The gunplay is basic but serviceable, it works, it feels fairly satisfying. At the level I was playing at, it was nothing to write home about. I had some basic weapons from an assault rifle to an SMG and a shotgun at one point, and it was just simple stuff about clicking heads, no advanced cover system or anything like that. It just worked. And to be honest, in this day and age, a combat system that just works is quite nice. The melee combat, however, has just a little bit more to it. It involves a dodge and parry mechanic with light and heavy attacks. The idea being that light can be spammed to knock a person off balance, but a heavy attack will breach someone's shield and do some core damage. So you end up parrying, dodging, blocking, etc. and eventually defeating your opponent, or getting defeated, depending on how things go. There's nothing inherently wrong with the combat in Dune either. It's interesting and it keeps the game going, but there's nothing specifically mind-blowing about it either. I was never finding myself with a clenched asshole and excitement, if you know what I mean. Time to touch on everybody's favourite survival aspects. Resources. Thankfully, you don't have to worry about eating. All you gotta do is keep yourself hydrated. There's multiple ways of doing it too. You can either go around sucking the mildew off some of the plants in the early morning, you can drain blood from fallen enemies and distill it back into water like the desert vampire you are. Or you can don one of Dune's famous still suits. Now for those uneducated on what a still suit does, it takes your shit and turns it back into water. That is literally how they explain it in the game. Genuinely, it takes your fecal matter and turns it back into water. The trade-off being the still suit makes water very accessible, but it's not very armoured. You can instead wear armour suits, that means you can take more damage, but then water is harder to come by. You also have to avoid the sun. Standing out in it for too long will give you heat stroke, and that'll have negative effects until you eventually die. And it's all pretty basic and straightforward, and actually becomes second nature super quickly. However, my favourite aspect of survival games that make the whole eating, drinking and surviving a lot easier is base building. So without further ado, let's talk about that. This is going to be another aspect of this game where I kind of either have to apologise or get the tough stuff out of the way first. Base building in Dune is going to be a love or a hate scenario in my opinion. If you're a fan of the IP and considering the movies made a stupid fucking amount of money, I think you'll be fine and you'll have a great time and you'll love it. If, however, you're not a big fan of Dune and you're playing it to join some mates or whatever, I genuinely think the look of the bases is going to put you off. Not to mention, you can only build them in specific areas, otherwise a sandworm will just gobble the lot up. What this seems to quickly lead to is every rocky outcrop looking like a South London council estate. And what I mean by that is there's high-rise buildings everywhere and lots of people running around with knives. Anyway, the base building is pretty good. They have a really cool like ghost system in that you plan your base out with this ghost and then fill it in as you get the resources. It makes it all a lot easier to plan ahead and make sure it all works before you start building and destroying things. I made a base that I was genuinely very proud of in the end. And because the game mostly takes place in PvE areas, you don't really have to pay attention to the meta and can just make your base an aesthetically pleasing beast, like I like to do. The only other downside that I can think of is before you know it, you have more workbenches, more tools, and more other gadgets than you know what to do with. Fuel refiner, blood refiner, crafting, weapons, armor, forge, recycler, power generators, and so on. There's so many. One of the cool things though is depending on which faction you pick in the story, you'll get tile sets so your base can reflect your allegiances. But yeah, all in all, base building works. It's good. It's like everything else within the game so far. It is serviceable. Everything up to now just fits together and makes for a genuinely enjoyable experience. It's nothing that blows your mind, but you'll find yourself having a good time and hours will just slip away like nothing, especially if you're playing with a good group of friends. One of the things that helps the Dunes of Arrakis feel a little bit more interesting is the vehicles. Early on, you'll have access to a sandbike, which is basically a little trike that can help you get from A to B pretty sharpish. And they're always quite cool to see driving past in the horizon as they're being chased by sandworms kicking up big plumes of dust. It's very picturesque and helps you really feel immersed in the setting. You'll be able to upgrade them so they have different roles, from being two-seaters to having cargo space, boosters, etc. And they all end up playing pivotal roles in the gameplay. There's a number of different vehicles that I glimpsed at, going from basic trikes to buggies to trucks to even ornithopters, which again are another really unique feature of Dune, which is basically like these helicopter looking dragonfly things. They're great. I haven't got to fly one yet, but I'm very excited to. This, in my opinion, is probably one of the biggest saving graces of Dune Awakening. What it means is that the potentially boring map becomes a lot smaller when you've got vehicles, and these are what leads to some quite pulse-pounding moments. Though we're playing a pivotal role both in PvE scenarios and some of the endgame, which seems to all be focused around PvP. I unfortunately don't have much information on the Deep Desert to hand, but once the game goes into full release, I'll be doing a follow-up video that gives you more details about what you can expect through the full life cycle of Dune. All in all, I am excited for Dune Awakening. It looks decent, it plays well, and there was enough pieces of candy to keep me interested. Not to mention, I've been looking forward to playing a survival game with a decently sized crew for a hot minute now. So if you like playing these kind of games with the group, it is definitely worth a look-see. If I had a gun to my head, I'd still recommend V Rising as my go-to survival game. However, this could all change once I've got some proper hands-on time with the full game. There is one thing I would like to call bullshit on when it comes to the release of Dune Awakening. For some bizarre reason, Funcom have gone with the idea that if you pre-order the game, you get 5 days early access. And I think this is kind of shady. I always thought early access for pre-ordering was kind of bullshit anyway, but when the game comes down to PvP as the end game, giving anybody a leg up to get to that endgame earlier is stupid. People no-life the shit out of these games. It happens. I get it. I used to be that kind of dude too. But what this means is they'll get to the end first, get all the top-end shit, and then they can just oppress people who are also trying to get there as well. And I just don't think it works. Now, they have said there will be 2 types of servers. One server that will come online for the early access, and then a brand new set of servers that come on for when everybody else joins. So then at that point, it takes my worries away, but it does just mean they're selling early access for a game that's already ready and made for extra money, which kind of sucks. If you've made it to the end of the video, slap Sandworm down in the comments and maybe I'll send some spice your way. If you've enjoyed the content, tickle the like button, slap subscribe, and make sure you have a fantastic day, whatever you choose to do with it. See ya.
I've been drinking Kool-Aid, cameras like I did when I was 9, 'cause I like to pretend